The last time we talked, I mean, business was done. You called the bottom.
Mm-hmm. See, you look at things. We talked even during the January earnings call that we saw things slow down in probably July of 11, and we were guessing it was going to try to bottom either in the fourth quarter or first quarter of 2012. And that's more just a statement that our industry tends to cycle like that. But as you know, and you followed us for a long time, well, you've got to keep track of things that are changing in the near term. If you want to run the place well, you've got to look at the longer term opportunities, which is where we spend most of our time.
The world economic situation is now in much greater focus than it ever has been. I mean, we wake up now, the first thing we do is, check what happened in Asia, what's happening in Europe, to have a sense of what's going to happen here. Do you do the same thing? I mean, can you look only on that short run, or do you really have to look at the long run?
David, when we make investments, and they're large ones, be it research and development for a chip that'll come out in 5 years, or a manufacturing plant like we opened in Richardson now, 2-3 years back, you've got to be looking out over 8-10 years when you make those choices. So, when we look at the global economy, we really don't have to hire consultants to look at somewhere like China or India and be able to conclude, is that economy going to be bigger in 10 years? It's going to be bigger. So go do the right things in terms of investment and go get the right people in place, the right technology in place. Same really though in the U.S. and Europe and other economies as well. And that is that, technology is still very alive, very well, changing all of our lives that are in this room. And as a result, we really keep track of those points when we think about investments.
You'd bought 2 semiconductor plants in Japan. You were closing them down. You were taking all the stuff out of those plants, and you were putting it on a boat, and you were shipping it to the United States. What's the message?
Well, the thing that we saw was back in 2009, and it was actually a plant in Virginia, but it did have a bunch of Virginia money and probably some European or German money behind it. We saw when the world was scared, if everybody remembers, in 2009, people were afraid the sun wasn't going to come up again. It was a perfect time to be out buying equipment and opportunity. Right. And so we were not afraid because the company had the balance sheet, we had the ability to make those choices. Whether we use that equipment in the next year or in the next 10 years, it was going to be a smart decision. And, last piece is, we're talking at the table. You can manufacture right here in North Texas, and you can do it well. It comes down to having great people and great minds, and yes, the right cost infrastructure, be it electricity, access to water, the types of things to be able to run a good company. And so we saw a good chance to do that here.
So are the competitive advantages not there? I mean, are we going to see more onshoring, or is this unique?
We haven't changed that much while the world talked about the world, or many companies going offshore. You've watched us manufacture in North Texas for many years. And so we think that's going to be a great opportunity for a long time.
It seems like this has been a challenge for TIA on and off over the years, is finding people to hire. But maybe the education is involved.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about it probably today. And, we had a great event with the United Way, what was it, last week? And Mayor Rawlins talked about the challenge that we're really facing as a society, and it all begins with education. And so if you look at the challenges we have in the U.S., we have right here in North Texas, we do need to focus on education. We do need to focus particularly on STEM education, or science and math, to make sure that we really do have people literate and with the right foundation of skills. Now, in terms of our ability to hire and recruit, there's still a lot of engineers coming out of schools around the country that we can hire and recruit. We're fortunate because of our reputation that we get access to some of those best people. But we do need to put more investment into education locally.
I know there have been some efforts on the part to sort of grow your own, to offer some specific inducements for people that would attend, a junior college and have a science and engineering focus. Is that what's required?
To me, when you start looking at math and science, and a lot of people in this room probably have the same experience, if you fall behind as early as 6th or 7th grade in math, it's not a catch-up program in junior high or high school. So if you look at a lot of the work we're doing as a company, it is really focused on what can you do to put better quality and better prepared math and science teachers in front of these kids at those really important ages. And I think you get math and science as something that kids are confident with and they're capable of, then there may be some things we've got to do further on in the secondary and at the higher levels of education. But I think that's the heart of what we have to focus on right now.
You're a global operator. Is it a level playing field out there?
You know, in many ways it's not. Meaning if, you know, we showed up in China or showed up in Singapore, went to a lot of different countries around the world, they see technology as the future. They see the opportunity to attract companies like a Texas Instruments or many of our peers, and so they do have many different tax approaches or capital incentives to be able to encourage you to invest in those countries. And so and I think it's one of the, you know, there's a lot of great things going for us here in Texas and in North Texas. Great competitive advantage. I can't pick a better state in the U.S. that I want to operate out of. But we've got to remember every day that we're competing for these companies and where people invest around the world. We've got some advantages and creativity, great people. But, you know, go back to that comment on education. We've got to be making sure the next generation is coming up with that training as well.
The trend that we're beginning to see now is people wanting to live near where they work. It looks like this is something that you all have done.
You know, we've got, probably, 15, close to 20 manufacturing sites around the world. Yeah. Many of them we've been in for a long time. So what we actually find more importantly, and it's back to why we find North Texas or Richardson a great place to put our latest wafer fab. It's about the quality of the people you put inside those buildings. It's about skill, it's about experience. And those are the things that we really focus on that particular front. The challenge instead that you have to look at is, do we have the right attitudes coming out of Washington, if you want to put folks up in that city into one bucket, that really says global markets are opportunities, okay, that they're not threats. Global opportunities can lead to local prosperity. And I don't think that translates. And I think we have people still struggling with the fact that you can take a Texas Instruments, and even though we ship 90% of our product or our revenue is shipped outside the U.S., the majority of our payroll is right here in North Texas. And what we should want as a country is more companies that are headquartered in the U.S. winning globally. Okay, and that's one of the things that gets lost in some of these strident arguments of, is something that takes place in the rest of the world bad for the U.S.?
Right.
Now, you know, you got to remind everybody, we've got 5% of the world's population. Okay, we may have 20% of the GDP, but we have 5% of the world's population. It says we only have 5% of the smartest people in the world. Okay, and so we've got to remember it's a big opportunity, and we want companies here in North Texas that are doing well overseas. That ought to be the foundation of how we think.
TI's been fun to follow for the last 30 years, 40 years.
It's been fun to work there.
But you got to be pretty nimble because you guys keep changing what you do.
How many people in this room don't have a cell phone? Yeah, okay, no hands up. You know, 10 years ago, if we'd asked that, it probably would have been half the room. 20 years ago, there would have been a handful of hands that would have gone up that actually had or used a cell phone. So in just 20 years, and those numbers actually apply, I think 80% of the planet carries a cell phone right now. So probably pushing 5 billion people in just 20 years. So, you know, as long as technology still is an opportunity to where it can rapidly change society, witness the cell phone, that's going to be a great opportunity for the companies. But the key is the world moves. And it's really good to be moving with it. In fact, it's better to be moving ahead of it. And that's something we've really tried to focus on. And some days that means don't be afraid of leaving businesses and make sure you're always looking ahead to where you want to invest.
Last summer, there was a period when we were here, we were talking to CEOs, we were saying they were actually holding off on decisions because of uncertainty, what was going to happen. Is that behind us now? I mean, are you convinced that that you see a path that the company can follow?
You know, David, I'll speak for TI and I'll speak for myself. We can't operate with the foresight of Washington in terms of what's known or what's not known. Think about the industries that we address and when we have to make investments. So to think that you're going to synchronize your investment schedule based around the election cycle is just crazy. You'd run the company in the ground if you did that. So for us, it's not a big issue. That's not a statement, though, that if you look around a lot of industries in the U.S., which in turn buy a lot of product and potentially are customers of ours, we have seen a slower economy in the U.S. because I think it has been faced with some of that. But for our business and the time cycles or the time constants we've got to look at, it's not a big factor that we played. Yeah, I think first thing is put down the newspaper and probably turn off talk TV. KRLD's fine, but because I think people just get distracted. And the fact is, I think the U.S. economy is starting to act healthier. I think certainly we see it in North Texas. Just go out and talk to people around the community, and you get a sense of that. I don't mean strong, but at least getting more constructive. Asia is going to continue to grow strong. Europe is still processing through some things, but even when I talk to customers in Germany, they are still looking at how they're going to grow and how they're going to invest. So I still think there's great opportunity. I just, I don't get slowed down by the near term.
It was announced earlier that you're going to head up, United Way. And that's just, I don't know how that used to be the norm. It used to be that civic leaders could run their companies, but also give back to the community and co-service. And it seems like more and more now, CEOs spend one night a week, in their hometown. How do you have time to do this?
Well, key step number one is have a good team. Okay, as anyone in this room knows, it really does matter. You try to do something like we're going to do during 2012 and 13 on United Way. It's about having a great group that's inside of TI. It's having a great group with Jennifer's team at United Way, and that really does amplify your time and amplify your effectiveness. But David and I've watched you, and you really are a role model in many ways on this. You can go back. I commented to the dinner last week. Eric Johnson in '61, when United Way became United Way for the first time, was leading Texas Instruments at the front of the electronics wave,
right,
building plants all over the world. And yet he found time to not just have TI be involved in United Way, but to lead the campaign. So we need to do it too. The fact is, it really does, make a big difference. The leaders in this room, you get the business leaders, and they make a decision that they're going to make it a priority. It tends to set the tone for everybody inside the company. And so not only does it make a difference, but then all you've got to do is make, one visit to one agency and watch the impact that's having, to where you move it out of the word campaign or move it out of it being a funding discussion and go see that 13-year-old stand up and say, well, I am going to go to college. Okay, they probably weren't if it wasn't for some of the things United Way was supporting. That moves it pretty close to home pretty quickly. And I think that's what, the leaders in this room around North Dallas, I think, we've got that responsibility.
So what does this area mean to you? Why are you here?
It comes down to people. It comes down to people, and this is home. And the fact is, what keeps it home is, can you get access to the things we've talked about? Great people. Can you get access to a business environment that lets you move quickly, lets you invest, lets you operate in the right cost-effective ways? And if you can, okay, why change? And that's what we have found over all the years. And so today, we are really, people in this room, folks with companies headquartered or operating in Texas, you're at an advantage compared to a lot of other states inside the U.S. And so, the biggest thing we have to do is remember that that's not a gift or it's an entitlement. That's a dynamic thing that changes daily. And so, all of us in this room are, our government leaders at the state level and hopefully at the federal level, we need to make sure that we can say that 10 years from now. And we ought to be focused on that.
Is this area an easy sell right now?
It is. And one of the things, and I think people in this room probably have their own personal experiences, we'll bring a lot of people in from around the world as well. And if I've had one, I've had 10 different leaders that talk about moving their families from Israel, from China, from France, Germany, whatever it is. And they're welcomed into the city of Dallas. Because I think one of the benefits we have is we're a diverse city. And many of the people that are in Dallas, a lot of us came from somewhere else. And so it tends to actually welcome and embrace people. And when you're attracting, very talented people that have other options, that's one of the things that they care about. They want to come to a modern city, they want to see the right facilities, they want to see the right capability, but they also want to feel welcome and be part of a community.
So in giving back and doing service like you're doing, I mean, you're helping the community, and it's helping TI too.
It is a wonderful cycle. When you watch that whole statement of strong communities build strong companies, and strong companies in turn build strong communities, it's a great virtual circle.
I know you have the opportunity all the time to talk to young people. So what do you tell? What they always ask you for advice. How can I get where you are? What do I need to do?
Biggest thing that I comment is make sure you're doing something you love, because if you love doing it, it's not going to feel like work. And then usually the asterisk is that's about 60% of the time, because that's about as good as it can get in most jobs. But you've got to enjoy what you do. You've got to enjoy the people you work with, and then love doing it. Stay focused on that. And what you'll find out, especially inside a company like TI, is opportunity usually finds you. If you're doing a good job and really performing and really competitive, one of the reasons that we're able to keep and help our young people advance is we try to find the ones that really want to do it and get opportunity. The way we reward you is give you more to do, and it's what great people want.
Yeah,
they want to be challenged. But we're fortunate that we have a lot of great people. I think if you got to meet a great room of 30-year-olds, I think you would see that ability to have great leaders even down inside of TI today. Because in the end, life is pretty simple. That is, figure out what the customer's problem is and help them solve it.
So I got to ask you, what are the great things? One of the few things I miss about doing a whole lot of television is, and doing radio, is you got to do props.
This is dangerous at this point.
No. Is that a beauty?